want your cray cray. Hey, hey, I want your AKA Jonescast. Hey, I want you to hear me now. Believe me later.
Hey there, lords and ladies. It is I, your host, Charlie, and the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Yes, and we're here to talk episode 11 of the AKA Jonescast. We are in season 2, AKA 3 Lives and Counting. Shocked by her own actions and haunted by visions of Kilgrave, Jessica worries she's turning into a monster. Trish's plans for Carl become clear. Now, I gotta ask you, did you count all 3 lives this episode?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had to sort of sit back and think about it. One was obviously Reva. The second one, I was thinking around for a second. I was like, oh, obviously it was Kilgrave himself. And now this makes 3, right?
Well, the 3 I counted were Officer Sunday.
But like who died in this episode? I thought it was referencing, the 3 people that Jessica's killed. But okay, but yeah, who died this episode? Okay, Officer Sunday.
Yeah, Officer Sunday. Dr. Carl.
Right.
And of course, the third one, Trish herself.
I mean,
because okay, this is a little nerdy on here, but you have to remember what is Trish's Marvel Comics character?
Hellcat.
Hellcat. How many lives do cats have?
Oh, I gotcha.
3 lives and counting. Tonight's episode was directed by Jennifer Lynch. Of course, Brian Michael Bendis gets our created by credit. The series was created by Melissa Rosenberg. And, of course, our writers are written by credits go to Lisa Randolph and Jack Kenny. Okay, now we open up this episode with, and you make a good point too with the deaths on Jessica's hands directly,
right?
Because we do get the triumphant return of everyone's favorite man in a purple shirt, Mr. Kilgrave himself.
Mr. Kilgrave, yeah.
Yes. In Jessica's mind.
I thought that was really cool. This is probably one of my favorite episodes throughout the season.
Yeah. It's great because it really, it plays with that craziness deep inside her. It gives us a nice comic booky visual understanding of it.
Exactly.
Because obviously, in her own reality, it's a voice in her head.
Right.
It's not really when hopes, it's not a physically manifested command hallucination of a guy in a purple shirt, but it is, and for what it's worth, when we open up, we see her sitting here and she's in her own head. And we really get that cascade of thoughts for her of all the things that are going through her mind. Right. And she's dealing with the fact that she just killed Dale.
Yeah.
And actually, I will say we got Kilgrave last episode, but you weren't 100. I mean, you might have known it was him, but we did. He did a little slow clap.
Right.
At the end of last episode. But we didn't really get it as Kilgrave. This episode, Kilgrave is a full-blown character. Our former Doctor Who is out there chatting it up, getting his Marvel money for this episode.
Yeah.
David Tennant, just brilliant as Kilgrave.
Right. It reminded me of, like an old episode of The Next Generation with the Q popping in and out. And it had sort of that metaphorical, weird, almost Shakespearean feel to the episode. That's what I really enjoyed about it.
And that is fantastic. And, of course, we see Jessica, of course, once she gets her wits about her, going through the process of cleaning up her mess.
Right.
And doing it very well, basically revealing what he has done, writing the suicide note. The last one I have to kill is myself.
Right.
dropping him off the house to hide the blunt trauma. Although, I do wonder if a coroner is going to spot that, and especially when there'll be a lot less blood from that fall than there was in the house.
Yeah.
But then again, he's not a cop. One of these moments to always remember here, he's a correctional officer, not a police officer.
Right.
Do police officers give the same value to them as they do to persons like
Officer Sunday?
Officer Sunday? And actually, now I'm wondering, did Officer Sunday die this episode or is it next episode?
Oh, that's
You know what? I'm
interesting
actually
point.
you
might be right.
You watch these things like back to back, and suddenly things get a little mushy in my head. No, actually,
it for sure was next episode.
Yes, that is actually next episode. So then, so who are 3 lives in counting?
Post hoc spoiler alert.
Yeah, well, it happens. Happens to the best of us. Because I was trying to think, there are 3 lives. There are 3 people who die in this. Well, so in that case, our 3 lives are Holiday.
Right.
And maybe maybe you're right in the first place. It's Holiday and Kilgrave, but then I don't know of a third person that Jessica has killed. So
it's Reba, isn't it?
Who's Reba?
Reba, Luke Cage's wife.
Oh yes. Oh, there we go. Okay, so yes, that would be the 3rd life in counting.
Right, that's what I figured. Yeah.
See, Mozz, you were so much smarter about these things than I am. You should be the professor. Yeah, well, that's good, man. That is fantastic. Yeah, so those would be the three lives that Jessica has taken.
Yeah.
Is Reba, Kilgrave himself, and then now Dale.
Officer Dale. Yeah.
That is his third life she has taken. And counting, because
it's so funny that they're mirroring her own psyche talking back at her, trying to give her some empathy as into what her mother goes through when she says, "You pulled me back," she must have a Kilgrave in her head, and Jessica was able to turn her off.
Yeah,
or him off.
Yeah, and that again is going to the second episode.
Oh, well, fair. Oh, geez. Should we start over?
No, it's fine. Hey, guys, this is a spoiler podcast. You knew that from the start. We have been trying to be as good as we can, but the fact of the matter is we do try to do these as 2-a-days. Trying to get to our big Luke Cage reveal, Luke Cage season 2, Electric Boogaloo, next week. So we did do these 2 episodes back to back, and then next week we are going to get to Luke Cage. And there is a great tie-in in our next episode to that Luke Cage, which we'll bring up when we get there. Right. But for right now, let's focus on what we're dealing with here.
Right.
So she's cleaned up the place, and of course, we get Nice Guard.
Right.
The guard that we thought that Dale might have been back last episode,
Right.
This woman who's like, hey, look, I'm not trying to cause you trouble. I'm not, we're all trying to get through this together. I'm not going to fault you for this. And she
right.
And of course, Alyssa plays the mother card and gets a little bit of space from her guard to call Jessica, which, not for nothing, maybe makes a point about Dale in this situation. It's a rude and horrible way to look at it, but the fact of the matter is that Dale being evil might be the only way that you can deal with someone like Jessica's mom.
I don't know. I think they're 2 extreme opposing situations that don't really offer up the truth about the situation. Mm-hmm. There's ways to handle it on the medium of either side. Just because she's a nice person doesn't mean she's also a smart person, Mm-hmm. Her, seeing that a super person is caged up and in a distressed situation, why don't you ask her how she's doing from behind the bars, really? Some of the choices that she makes are a little baffling.
Yeah. And yeah, well, and she pays for it too.
Right. But
I
mean, like, I can't even be mad about it. It's her own fault.
Yeah.
Like, that was a really, really silly thing to do.
Without a doubt, the whole thing is strange in its on its forefront. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So in this episode, we have so she does call Jessica because, as she says to her daughter went on a blind date and she's real worried about her.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought this was great because I thought at first when they get on the phone, I thought Alyssa was trying to build an alibi for Jessica. Oh, you went out, right? And I was like, how smart is that? And then it was still pretty smart how she used it as cover for
and it was coded language because that's how you talk in prison. If you ever watch The Sopranos and I forget Tony's brother-in-law, who's kind of the Fredo of the Sopranos family, just having trouble remembering what the codes were about chicory and things like that when you try to say my friend from Louisiana, and it's like, he's got the coffee with the chicory. And Tony's like, what are you talking about? Chicory, that's what they put in the coffee, Anyway, that's a little Sopranos reference for you. So yeah, no, they were very good, and they each gronked what the other was saying, as they say in this business. Yeah. And Jessica, gets away with it. It is a crime that, honestly, and not for nothing, the fact that he did have all those trophies, that it was known he was a bad prison guard, probably says to people, you know what, let's not look too deep.
Right. Right.
And that is Jessica's saving grace in this. Is people are saying, let's not look too deep.
Right. They said the same thing about Kilgrave. You know what I mean? Well, so she is doing good work, and I think the argument that that Kilgrave is making here is not a fair one to Jessica. That she has two options, that she is a killer, and blah blah blah. That isn't the only way to look at it. Again, the same situation. Sometimes people need to be killed, and sometimes people aren't comfortable with that. You know what I mean? And they let that decision you as a person, as a bad person, even though you did something good. We find it really hard to reconcile those two facts,
Well, because, and for what it's worth, from Jessica's perspective, it's that once you start to say people need to be killed,
I know.
It gets too easy to say, well, hey, they all need to be killed. And that's sort of the problem. Is like the only thing that makes the occasional bit of vigilante justice palatable is that we find vigilante justice in general distasteful.
Right. But at the same time, we should understand that it is a balance and a relationship, and treat it as such, and not as a extreme that shouldn't be considered, or that someone should be made to feel as Jessica does in this situation because of her actions.
Well,
I don't think you know what I mean. I don't think that's fair.
I look at you. You've seen The Watchmen or read the book, right?
Yeah.
And you have Ozymandias, who is sitting there saying, "Listen, I actually made it a point to memorize the names. I guess he got the New York City telephone directory and just memorized every name in the New York City telephone directory. Made sure he understood every person he was killing, so he would feel the guilt of it, because he is going to kill people on a massive scale." But he knows that, if I just kill people on a massive scale, but I don't feel guilt over it, I'm just going to go kill more people later. And that's the thing of it, is that you have to have that guilt, that you take the life, but not because you feel, some people, you can't be the Punisher. You can't say some people need to be killed and I'm the one who's going to kill them.
Right.
You have to be the guy who says, I'm going to kill people because sometimes there's no other option but to use deadly force.
Right.
But when I do, it is not because I feel it's okay to use deadly force. It's because I had no other option. And you look at that. You think about so many things in our modern world where there is such controversy over the concept of deadly force. And what people will say is, yes, sometimes when you're in that situation, you feel you have no other choice. And of course, what important thing to understand is it's not whether or not there are times when you have no other choice. It's about making sure that you have not so minimized the fact that you have to make this choice to the point where you say, well, I can just make that choice. I can be the Punisher. I can be Frank Castle. And I won't worry about the people I hurt in my actions because there's a greater good I'm doing by these actions.
Right.
You have to be like Ozymandias, memorize those names. Know the cost of the actions you take.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can't spend time wallowing over something that was done. Like, accept it and move on, and shouldn't,
Well,
but and if it was good or bad, make that determination and move on. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was a good thing. Accept that it was a good thing. In certain cases, that it can be.
But if you do that, then you run the risk of just saying, well, this is a good thing too.
I understand, but that is the risk that we're taking. I think we need to pay proper homage to either side of it in order to be honest about the situation in any form. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, of course. And that's the thing. This is the thing. If there were easy answers, there would be no good stories. Good stories come from the fact that there is not an easy answer. You can look at Kilgrave in Black Panther or Thanos in Infinity War. And, what makes it an interesting story is that these guys aren't 100% wrong. But what makes them the villain is their lack of remorse, their sense of their sense of entitlement about the decision that they're about to make. They feel they are justified in it because of all these factors. And the factors that are their justification aren't wrong. And actually I meant Killmonger, not Kilgrave. From Black Panther. Kilgrave is just 100% evil. That man has no excuse. In fact, that first season they kind of give lip service to the idea of, oh, I was abused. And it's like, you're not doing this because you're abused. You did this because you were, freaking Billy Mooney sending people to the cornfield. You were a child who could not be denied and hence spoiled yourself. But in this situation, it is this balance between the fact that it is okay to say there are times when we have an honest crime to redress.
Right.
But what keeps us from being Killmonger or Thanos is that we are burdened by the weight. This is what Spider-Man taught us with great power.
But isn't that sort of like unfairly like it's kind of like a mental disability in a sense if you're constantly framing everything you do in that situation. It doesn't allow you to properly move forward. It's like, okay, I understand, but you shouldn't be carrying the guilt to it to the point where you're like Jessica. What I'm trying to say is I don't think that characterization that Kilgrave is presenting to her is very fair.
Well, I guess what I would present to you is this idea that, it's Kilgrave haunting her, not Dale Halliday.
Or it's herself haunting her.
Well, exactly. But again, the form he takes, the form that her guilt takes is Kilgrave.
Right.
And interestingly enough, not even Reba. It is Kilgrave, the form that it takes, because Kilgrave was this moment where she was, both under manipulation and at the same time making that choice that she had avoided the entire last season. Right. The entire last season was all about her coming to that moment to make the choice. Now, when she kills Holiday or when she kills Reba, these are all very duress-filled moments. She kills Reba while she's under the influence of Kilgrave. When she kills Dale Holiday, it is because he is attacking her, and it is literally a life and death struggle. It is literally he will kill her if she does not kill him. That there is not a easy I can subdue him option.
Right.
Because, she's blinded, and, I don't think she even intended to put his billy club through his head,
No.
But it's just the way that things happened, is that she, as she's lashing out, she hits him in a way that is fatal. And, it is the reality that she is with Kilgrave here because that is the choice she made.
Yeah, and Kilgrave's already lived inside of her head, It's like if her mind needed somewhere else to put these thoughts, that personality has already a form and like a butt groove carved out in the couch of her mind. You know what I mean?
Yes, fair enough. But this is, and like I said, this is what makes this a story of a superhero rather than this, as much as she hates that term,
Yeah.
Which is, this I think a lot of this is about that arc. I think a lot of what we're seeing this season maybe is about that arc is, are you a hero? Are you someone who is doing this selfless act because it is the right thing to do, even though there is this risk to your body and mind? That's the thing. It's like there is a risk in taking on this obligation.
No. But I think Jessica's perspective is saying that you don't have to go out looking to save people. If someone happens upon you that's in trouble, do your best. But that's your only obligation. You know what I mean? As to be considered a good person. Use your powers when you can, but you shouldn't have to go out and seeking things to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't need to be Daredevil. Is what
right.
Perspective. But I think at the end of the day, I think that there is maybe a aspect of Daredevil that is the point here. That no, you have this gift, and I think this is something that Trish will hit upon next episode, which is that these gifts aren't just to be wasted or ignored or to be fretted over.
Right, but she doesn't understand. Just like the thing Jessica wanted and didn't understand, she's wanting something she doesn't understand also.
Well, this is true. And before we get too much into that, because that's next episode, let's talk
about... I tried to... Yeah.
Let's talk about what Trish does this episode. Okay, aside from...
Holy cow.
From putting Malcolm in the trunk. Malcolm is our poor unfortunate soul here.
He's like the lab rat that all the bad experiments are done to.
Yes. Well, he is, he trusts, because of course, last episode, he and Trish did track down Kilgrave. And rather than report this information, we have found Kilgrave, Trish knocks Malcolm out, locks him in the trunk.
Ties him up using, her gym gear.
Yes, and interestingly enough, a nice parallel to something we see at the end of next episode as well, of this idea of knocking someone out and then just taking them with you.
Right.
In this case, she has captured Kilgrave, and she is, not Kilgrave, is Carl Malice, and is asking him to give her the powers. To use this system that he has developed to let her have these powers so that she can make these choices.
Right.
And, after Jessica finds Malcolm, they go through a little bit of fighting and anger and all this kind of stuff. But Malcolm shows he can, build out what a good detective does. He remembers everything he saw, he breaks it down, and then he ties it all together with where they are and how to find it. And really, Malcolm kind of saves the day here in a very real sense. And they find out what they were looking for, which is feline distemper vaccine. I believe it was feline distemper, not feline AIDS, but
right.
Yeah, and they Feline. Remember that, kids. And they do go back to LGH or IGH, industrial
right. Garment, hosiery, garments.
Hosieries and garment, yeah. Still don't know what an industrial hosiery is, but they go in and and Carl, he's actually, here's my biggest thing with this whole story as it plays out is,
okay.
They do the injections, and can I tell you what I love the best about this whole,
What's that?
That it has a direct correlation to both to Captain America and the process that was done, because with Captain America, it is all of these needles that are going to be injecting things into various parts of his body. And when they created the Abomination in The Incredible Hulk with Emil Blonsky, and they show the process he goes through, it is a similar process. Really showing that all of this work is based off of Dr. Erskine's original quest for the super soldier. And it's a nice thing that I think that when you're watching it, it's a nice callback for you to see, where you can see how all of these technologies, what Kilgrave is doing, or not, what Dr. Malice, what Carl Malice is doing, what the Doctor in Luke Cage was doing, and all of these.
Kozlov, right?
Well,
that was Kozlov?
Well, no, that wasn't Kozlov in Luke Cage. That was wasn't Kilbrew. Kilbrew was Deadpool. I forget his name. But he's also
Kozlov was in this show then?
No, Kozlov was killed off screen in this episode. Kozlov was the Doctor at the start of last episode. Kozlov was the Doctor working with Will
Simpson.
Will Simpson, yes. Kozlov created Will Simpson.
Gotcha. And
Kozlov was a guy who worked with Carl Malice. And
because what I've been thinking this whole time is, it turns out Carl isn't that bad. So who's the bad guy here,
Well, it's an interesting question about when you say Carl isn't that bad.
I mean,
well, there's a couple of things. Here's my thing, okay? Just as a point of order, okay? Will Simpson dies in this story. Gets his head turned all the way around. The character he's based on, which is Frank Simpson, Nuke, is a guy who has been pieced back together several times.
So he's got 9 lives too.
Well, yeah. Well, they put bionic parts into him. So it would not surprise me if in Daredevil season 3, or Jessica Jones season 3, or something else season 3, we get Will Simpson as Nuke back as sort of a cyborg killer. They may even, do a nice little crossover and put him into the Deathlock project. It'll be fun. Secondly, because of course, after everything goes pear-shaped with the experiment with Patsy, Malice decides to kill himself.
Right.
He says, nothing I have created is worth anything. He doesn't shoot himself in the head. He shoots the oxygen tanks in there and tells everyone to leave.
Oh, interesting. Right.
And it makes me and basically there's 2 aspects to this. One is, okay, he's burning down his lab, which is fine, but he could have also shot himself in the head. And as a method of killing himself, it makes me wonder how much of this, Carl Malice isn't a nice guy in the comic books. And there is a quality of this that is, as people will point out, it is really unethical that he has this patient who is 100% dependent on him, who he has created a romantic relationship with.
Right, but he left Kozlov to be able to do this just for her. I mean, there was a realness to his intentions,
Well, to be more specific, he left Kozlov because he didn't want Kozlov to sell the science to the military.
Right. So another thing showing his intentions were for the science and for Alyssa.
I mean, it's an interesting. You know what? It's an interesting. Just because you don't want the military to have your science doesn't make you a nice guy. It just means that it's the enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. That we can all agree. The U.S. and Churchill and Stalin can all agree Hitler's a bad guy.
Right.
However, how much better any of the guys, any of these other people are pairing with is a real debate. I mean, it's a real question. Are we actually? I mean, honestly, you could make this very strong argument that the U.S. and England at the time with its colonies in throughout the world and
right.
Russia were not so much worse than any of the other evils that they were fighting in the Axis powers. I mean, honestly, Hitler does take it up a notch. Hitler really, he is the best at being evil. There's no doubt about that.
No, but I don't think anybody else was really aiming for world domination at the time. No, I mean he was the one that was a direct threat at the moment.
Well, exactly, he was the direct threat. But we like to frame it in these more moral quandaries. And in that moral quandary, you actually do get into this problem, which is sort of the problem that you have with Jessica Jones here, where she has to kill, but she has to feel guilt about it. And
and that's exactly my point, though. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but
these moral quandaries are the real problem. As long as we're real about it and understand the situation and act like grown-ups, I think we can get on feeling just the way we should about things.
Well, no, and let me give you the reason why. Because we decided to fight fascism, because the world decided to fight fascism suddenly became very out of style. And people who had come from fighting Hitler looked at the world around them and said, you know what, maybe, yes, Hitler was way worse than anything any of us were doing, but what we were doing was not that good.
No, I understand that.
And you do see, after World War II, this expansion of the idea of human rights, the idea of moving away from this very colonizer-centric view of the world, that we are that the colonizers bring roads and medicine and all these things, and you should just be thankful that we're kind enough to take over your country.
Right.
And suddenly there gets to be this idea among the middle class, among the bourgeoisie, that the way that the world has been since time immemorial is wrong. And we start to evolve as people and move beyond that goal. And that is the point of Jessica feeling this guilt. Because if you feel the guilt, you are still human.
I understand that, but guilt shouldn't be a permanent state.
Well, maybe it should.
That is bad for you. That is bad for you.
Well, it's bad for you, but it's also good for you.
No, it's not. I don't think that's a terrible thing.
There's this idea that is put out there, which is we will never forget the crimes that people have done. And the fact of the matter is the people who are most concerned about never forgetting are countries like Germany, who have very strict rules about how we talk about these things, because they say we do not whitewash this, we do not gloss over this, because
I understand, but that doesn't mean that you understanding the full scope of the situation, going too far in the other direction and being not understanding the whole part of the question is just dooming yourself to repeat it by making the same mistakes, by pretending something isn't there. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, there are people that are too happy to forget. There are people that are more than happy to say that all those statues are just nice little statues of the past. They're not honoring anything, even though they often have plaques that explicitly state that they are monuments to white supremacy. You know, it is a issue where people have to say, you know, we really do need to be cognizant of our own sins.
Right.
And
No,
in being cognizant of our own sins. And, you know, and yes, a lot of times it is, well, I'm cognizant of your sins, not necessarily my own. But we all are in that same boat. We all share in the sins of our past.
No. But that's the thing. It's not all the same boat. Some sins are worth it. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, and we should dignify the ones that are worth it. If like someone, you know, like at the end of Interstellar. Did you see the movie Interstellar?
I have not seen it yet. No.
Okay, so the scientist knows that his equation doesn't work, but he propels all of humanity to continue working towards a solution that he doesn't think is there, simply because he feels like he has to do it, because just in case something might work out. And something does work out, and it's his decision to sell his humanity by being this bad person, by making everybody on this road to doing something that there isn't a solution for, just to keep humanity going until something does happen. Like, and people would see him as a bad guy, but his point was, I gave away my humanity to save humanity. You know what I mean? You can take it from me. So,
but you know, I guess the argument is that down that road lies the Punisher. You know, that when you get that idea that I have this moral clarity that no one else has.
Right. But monitoring ourselves and keeping ourselves back from it is the way to do it. And I think to truly monitor that is not to amass guilt on yourself that you don't need, that is an unnecessary. Just because you should feel it because it's an appropriate emotion doesn't mean you should carry it with you for the whole time, or that you shouldn't be forgiven for it relative to the good that came from it. Understanding the real nature of an event, I think, is important.
You know, and I think that is great in the philosophical debate of it. But I think you know there is a nice parallel here with the Spider-Man story. You know, Spider-Man gets his powers, and his immediate thought is, how do I make money off of it? How do I become an entertainer? How do I become a celebrity? Because it is not about using these powers for good. It's about, what can these powers do for me? That's not what you can do for your powers. That's what your powers can do for you. And when his uncle is murdered by the person he doesn't stop, that guilt is what makes him be a hero.
Right.
And the reality is that for many people, it is so easy to just want to be the entertainer, to want to be the criminal, to want to cross this line. And the only thing that keeps him from crossing this line, often, at least in these comic book stories, because they are simplistic stories, is this guilt. The guilt they feel over killing even someone like Kilgrave.
Right, but at some point, is it not possible to think of a scenario where you grow from the decision, are more in charge of your faculties to the point where you can make a better decision next time? Isn't that the point altogether?
I mean, and again, that is the $6 billion question.
Right. I mean, do you believe in humanity being able to better themselves, or are we forsaking that and saying that, you know?
It is not so much that I don't believe in humanity's ability to better themselves. It's that I am distrustful of those who say, well, I'm better now. You know, I'm distrustful of the person who says, I feel much better now.
But what should your response to distrust be?
Well, my response to distrust should be to see, well, what have you done since then?
Right.
And the reality is that when someone is in this moment where they are going to take this life, and they've made this choice to take this life, if they can walk away from that action too easily, they will walk back towards that action too easily. Right. And that's the point. It's like, there needs to be a weight in your heart for every life you take. Because if there's not, then no life has value.
I see. That's a premise that I think is faulty.
Well, you know, I guess...
or at least that's the premise that I disagree with, is what I mean.
I guess what I would say is I observe humanity as best I can, and I do see we are not always the best that we could be. And I do feel that when you make that exception for Kilgrave, we will find another reason to make another exception.
Perhaps we should, though.
Well,
perhaps there will be a need for it.
There's always a need for it, but when we make, it is this idea, and this is this superheroic ideal, which is that, killing Hitler is, without a doubt, a good.
Right.
But mostly because killing Hitler saying I would kill Hitler is a meaningless statement because Hitler is already dead. His evil is well known, and there is no one to cry over Hitler's grave. But if you are in that moment and you have that choice between capturing and killing Hitler, making Hitler stand trial, making Hitler go through the process, or simply ending his life there, it becomes a slightly more complex question. Right. And when it's not Hitler, it suddenly goes out the window. Because now it's like, okay, so Mussolini. Is Mussolini really Hitler-level evil? Is he just, generally speaking, mob boss evil? Is Tojo the worst person in all of Japan? And by the way, yes, he was actually possibly in many ways worse than Hitler. But we also let him go. Hirohito and Hitler, or Hirohito and Tojo were actually monstrous people on a level that is only now kind of really understood because, when they were captured, we sort of gave them the pass because we really didn't want, because we'd already dropped 2 nuclear bombs on them. So we're like, okay, we're not gonna belabor the point at that point. But yeah, honestly, I think Mussolini gets like the worst rap of anybody. I mean, he was just a petty dictator. He didn't want to murder lots of people. I mean, yeah, he wanted to murder a lot of people, but not like for any particular reason, just because they disagreed with him. Mussolini was like Trump. Yeah. Right.
And so there are degrees, and there are degrees to it, but I think every action should be judged on its merits as they happen. You can't assume to prejudge a situation and use that sort of hypothetical thinking to hinder yourself from being a full and complete person going forward and expecting you to be your best in situations that call for it. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And like I said, I just feel that guilt has a purpose.
Right. But transitionarily, whatever.
Transitionarily is the correct word. Or okay. In transition, yeah. You're right. Don't question yourself. Just say the word. All words are made up. Remember what Thor taught us. All words are made up.
Indeed.
And yeah, I think that, I mean, to be fair, and I guess this is what my central point is. Jessica is not a well person.
Right.
Jessica is dealing with a bunch of stuff in her head that isn't right. Much like her mom, and honestly, there's a real question as to how much of this was there before the accident and how much of this the accident just reinforced.
Yeah, how much of that is human and what part of it is superhero, you know what I mean?
Exactly. And so for Jessica, she is in this state where she is constantly trying not to be the murderer. Because it is so easy. And you see this with her mom. It is so easy to be the murderer. Because her mom would kill Dale and not shed a tear.
Right.
And when they talk about this, she says, "Is he in your dreams?" And, Jessica says, "Who?" Because she thinks she's going to say Kilgrave, because Kilgrave's in her dreams. It's like, Dale, it's like, because for Alyssa, it's just, the people I murder, they show up in my dreams all the time, jerks. But that's the sociopathology of it, is that unless you are willing to say taking a life is wrong, you will always find yourself in a position where you are willing to justify why this life was okay. To the point where Jessica might kill Dorothy because she's a bad influence on Patsy, or may kill Patsy because Patsy is a taker, and we've established that this season.
You're painting one side of the argument as being illogical. You know what I mean? I think we can expect people to reasonably make that choice. I think so.
Like I say, I have never been one to bet on the reasonableness of humanity. You know, we are many, many things, but we are very, very clever monkeys, but we are not the most rational monkeys. But then again, I think that rational assumes precognition. And if you can't presume precognition, you don't know what your choices outcomes will be. You know, I just watched was it 1123? I just finished 1123.
Oh,
such a great series on Hulu.
Oh man.
Oh, fantastic. And you know, you watch that show and it all just gets spoilers. Well, it gets reset this season. Maybe we'll do another season. We'll see if they can roll up some money to the Stephen King roll up the money trick to Stephen King's house. But yeah, it is this thing that, you know, you dedicate yourself to this outcome to change, and then you realize that you were over glamorizing aspects, and you forgot what was actually important.
Right.
And you see in this quality that is, you know, you keep on going back and back and back, and how it is a fool's errand, because what you're trying to do is to fix a problem, and you never can. Because you are trying to put this emotional world into a rational world. And this, I think, is where you and I have this disconnect is, you know, as a rational person, certainly, you know, I can be that cold Vulcan who says, you know, the good of the many outweighs the good of the few and all these kind of things. But in that moment, what makes me human, what makes me willing to be a hero is the fact that I say we must find a third option. Because I would rather die fighting for good than live serving evil.
Heroes aren't one size fit all, you know what I mean?
Not.
Sometimes you need one kind of hero, sometimes you need another kind of hero.
And we'll talk about that a bit more. We've already gone 47 minutes, man.
I know. And this is why I love this episode so much. There was so much, and this is exactly the kind of arguments and conversations we'd be having about a very heavy Star Trek The Next Generation episode. And this is why I really love this episode.
This is a great episode. I think the next episode has its greatness, too. I mean, honestly,
Indeed.
I really like how Jessica Jones plays out throughout this season. You know, every second season always has its critics, but I think that there is so much there, so much that continues through it. And honestly, one of my favorite things next episode is a great bit of universe building that is a blink if you miss it. You blink and you might miss it.
Ooh.
Universe building. But it is so important to this story that I am very happy to have it here. We'll talk about that next week. Mozz, final thoughts, and then how can people find you?
Oh, I think we went pretty deep enough into this episode. If you want to find me, you can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And, of course, like I said, we've gone through it all, but if you'd like to write to me in an old-fashioned email way the way our Mozz and Poz once did, do so at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. And, of course, follow me on the Twitters. I live tweet Cloak and Dagger sometimes when I can, unless Lilith Hellfire needs to record on a Thursday at 8, which she's doing tomorrow. At Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Oh, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me and Mozz talk it all through. Hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. And remember, me and Mozz, we really want to be your friends.